Hi, I'm Greg Euland, and this is Connected. Today, I get to sit down with Michael Cirillo, CEO at Flex Dealer and the host of the Dealer Playbook. If you haven't caught that podcast, you got to check it out. It's one of the top-rated automotive podcasts out there, really focused on helping dealers. So again, that's the Dealer Playbook. Make sure to check it out. But Michael, thanks so much for joining me, and looking forward to the conversation. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about it.
Yep. So I noticed, Michael, I couldn't help but notice the awesome chair that you're sitting in. So that's one of the things when we were building out this studio, I was like, I don't know if I like these chairs and, the white, I don't know. But it seems like you have a very comfortable chair. So what was that process like, finding a piece of furniture that you could sit in for however long?
I'm kind of a research nut. My wife will tell you about this. My idea of a good time. Oh, crap. I'm about to expose how kind of nerdy I am. A Friday night, you will catch Cirillo on YouTube watching how-tos and reviews. And so, I used to wrestle in high school and had a pretty nasty accident at one point. And I've always had a bad back. So now when it comes to being an office worker, it's like, man, anybody that sits at a desk knows like that lower back gets to you. So I just started researching office chairs, and I stumbled on this video of an ex-Google engineer, and he had 6 or 7 office chairs that he had bought over his career. And so he just went through the pros and cons of it. And so what I found was there's this brand, and I can't even remember what it's called, but it almost has this exoskeleton that morphs to your back. Super expensive. And I get it. I'm sitting in it all day, but I'm not I'm pretty frugal. But the shocker was, he said, this chair from Staples is by far the best all round one. And it's like $200. So I went on Amazon and I bought it, and here we are. All
right. No, that's great. That's great.
I had to give you some of the story, or else it was going to be like staples.com. And you know what I mean? So, but that's it. And it's great. And it's got a headrest. You can take so when we're really nerding out and need to lay back at our computer, it's got all the things. So it's great.
I hear you. No, that's good. That's good. So you've been doing this for a long time. You're one of the, OG podcasters in automotive retail, at least. You've been doing the Dealer Playbook for, going on 10 years, right?
Yeah, we're going on our 10th year, just past 500 episodes. We're about 520 episodes in, and no end in sight.
Yeah, that's great. So with that, you've obviously, 520 episodes. You've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of different people. Mm-hmm. Any of them stand out? Like any that you just look back on, it's like, man, that was a really good conversation. You don't want to dog anybody, but sometimes you just get into a conversation, you go, man, I took a lot away from that, or that was a really cool person, or I don't know, any of them stand out to you?
Yeah, there's probably too many to mention. However, what I will say is, early on, I think I hung my hat perhaps too firmly on, it's got to be a big name. It's got to be the name that everyone's heard of. And so, we were really fortunate early on, because I think by episode 10 or 11, I had Gary Vaynerchuk on the show, and everyone was like, how the heck do you do that? And then, episode 15 or 16 was Grant Cardone for the first time, ended up having him on 6 or 7 times, and all these New York Times bestselling authors and stuff. And what I realized is that some of my favorites are the people that nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah.
And I thought about that and why that might be. And I think it's because, when you get to a certain level of success, you kind of, I'm not going to say you don't care, but you kind of, for lack of better words, don't. It's like, okay, I'm on another podcast. But when it's that person that's kind of in the day-to-day, the grind, they're making a name for themselves, they're hungry, they've got really good information. There are so many people that I've been able to sit down with who were kind of not really anybody back when I interviewed them, and all of a sudden have made these amazing things for themselves. One in particular is a pal of mine. His name's Marcus Sheridan. And the first time I had him on the show, he was starting to kind of make a name for himself, but he spoke about the importance of content marketing, content creation. And that's always stood out, because his philosophy has really helped me in my career, and especially how I produce the podcast. He spoke about the concept of they ask, you answer, and how even in a 2022 world, this stands true. how difficult it still actually is to find good information online.
Yeah.
And so if you're the brand or the company or the individual who's actually taking the time to answer people's questions, you win. And so there's definitely this affinity I have for the lesser knowns that I get to interview, because they always seem to just have those very tactical, pieces of advice. Whereas the bigger names are usually like, hustle more. And you're like, oh, okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I hear you. No, and that's a great example with the content marketing. I mean, I always look at it as you basically have, when you think about, marketing as a whole, you got proactive and you got reactive, right? And reactive, that's what content marketing is, right? You somehow get demand, or you're building on demand that already exists, and you're there, right? So somebody searches something reactively, you're there. You're the one that has the answer, to your point. So there's always two pieces to it. You either got to generate demand or capture demand. And, if somebody else is generating it for you, that's not a bad thing, as long as you can capture it. So that proactive versus reactive is, it lines right up with what you're saying with the content marketing pieces. So
it fits into, as we produced the show, I want to say I was probably year 5. I don't know if this exposes how slow a study I am, but probably around year 5, I started to really pick up on this trend, because there were common traits like that, or common behaviors or common pieces of advice that I started to notice a lot of the guests were sharing in their own words. So for Marcus Sheridan, his phraseology is they ask, you answer.
Yep.
But others were starting to say things like, just finally tell people what you do accurately. In our industry, we boiled it down to one buzzword, which was transparency. You remember when transparency, what'd you get out of NADA? Transparency, dude. It was like, oh my God. Okay. So, but there were other common themes that I started to pick up on. And it was about year 5 that we conducted a study and went back over the previous, couple hundred episodes, and noticed that over 60% of every guest said one thing in particular in common, whether they were a content creator, a personal brand, a sales expert, and it was what we've boiled down on the podcast to one acronym, because we know we love acronyms in this industry. Yep. And it's BRT, build relationships of trust. Every single one of these, 60+% of guests all boiled everything they did down to that one concept. Without relationships, we're nothing. Without the desire to empower and serve somebody else, we're not going to get very far. Focus too much on the transaction and not the individual, you're not going to sell as many cars. You start to, interview individuals like Ali Rida, who, if you recall, had that kind of controversial Guinness Book of World Record thing going on between him and Joe Girard, where he sold over 1,500 vehicles in a year.
Right.
And you sit down with him and spend time with him, and he does not talk about how to negotiate a car sale, like the thing that everybody wants to talk about. What are your word tracks? If somebody says this, what do you say? He doesn't focus on any of that. It blew me away. He would say things, Greg, like, when my family and I go out to eat, I make sure that I pop into back and give my compliments to the chef and ask them how they're doing, and if there's anything I can do to help them. I don't eat my lunch in a silo. I go out into the community, and I'm getting to know people, and I'm participating in the community. My clients are seeing me at their kids' ball games. I really, as I pay attention to that, not only has that empowered me in my own business, but those that are truly paying attention, who can get past the, well, but how do I be a good person? It's like, dude, if you can't figure out how to do one good thing for somebody else, then go back to your word tracks.
Right.
But it really started empowering a lot of people. We started getting feedback from listeners saying, I tried that thing. I just went out on a limb and stopped by the coffee shop and grabbed some coffee for my coworkers or for my boss or for my customers. And it's crazy what that little gesture did. So, I look at that historically. how many amazing things in our industry and beyond have happened predicated upon the concept of build relationships of trust. And then as we move into the future, Greg, and we look at our industry and we're like, this migration from ICE to EV, Web3, the metaverse, all of these things. What I find interesting, I'm kind of tracking, is that still, regardless of the medium, regardless of the locale, everything keeps boiling back down to, great, so you're in the metaverse and you're buying a car sitting across a desk from a cartoon character dressed up like Donkey Kong.
Right.
The people behind those avatars still want to trust in the other person behind the avatar to move that sale forward. So I've thoroughly enjoyed my time being able to sit down and have conversations with these individuals and track that, because that one element of build relationships of trust has really been a real rally point, a beckon cry, if you will, for the community that I hope to be a part of in retail automotive, to help people think differently about how they navigate the day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. So, your point's well taken in that it's not about the transaction. I mean, it is, right? Ultimately, that interaction that you have and that transaction that you have matter. And we need to make the most out of every customer touch point that we have, right? And
Right.
that's the reality of the business that we're in. But it becomes much easier, and you're able to be much more successful if you've laid the groundwork to have that trust and that underlying relationship with whoever's in front of you. Hopefully it's somebody that you've known for a long time, but maybe it's somebody that you've known for 15 minutes. But you have to have that perspective too, where if I'm selling a car and somebody walks into the store, I have to know that from that person's perspective. So if I flip around and I'm on the other side of the interaction, they've already spent 20, 25, 40 hours researching and interacting. Right. So for them, they already know the car. They feel like they know me on some level because of the interactions that they've had, whether that's through chat or email or text or whatever the communication channel was. And to be able to make that meaningful and to leverage it is really important. So you have to, you have to find ways as whether you're the salesperson or anybody else, any relationship that you have, find ways to bring value in every interaction, right? And that comes from that trust and that relationships that you've built over whatever period of time, whether it's 2 minutes or 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of it this way, like it's hard because on the retail side of the business, we're moving in these 30-day cycles, and that creates, I think, as much as from a marketing perspective, I loathe the idea, from an urgency perspective to make sure that I'm taking the appropriate actions every day to enhance my life. I understand that's something that's needed, but I also understand that may also be hindering my ability to think beyond myself. Because if I'm always focused on myself, that's why I think it becomes difficult to think about others. Guys like Ali Rita, Frank Cranitti, and the likes, there's dozens of others throughout this industry. They're trying to break that mindset of me, and shifting it to you. And the more that we do that, the more that effort is compounded, the more we reset into a new cycle where business opportunities are constantly happening and we're constantly seeing them, and it builds our confidence to go and serve more regularly. But we've got to break that cycle at some point. And in our industry, where we're typically focused inward, got to hit volume, got to sell X, got to reach this quota, got to, all of those things are shifting our focus back to the transaction, even though I think our hearts are telling us we need to be focused more on customer. Then there's those that say, well, how does technology play into this? And I mean, people always find it weird that I'm a guy that develops technology. I mean, we have a very fast, quick, inventory solution that we've built and that we're continuing to build out. And people go, well, but isn't that supposed to solve all of these problems and make it better and faster? And the reality of it is, I think, Greg, that if we then become too dependent on the tools, that makes us a tool. Don't be a tool. the tools are in place to enhance our ability to go do more of the thing that matters. It's no different than the way I see it. It's no different than hiring somebody to help out with the workload. I don't expect them to do all of the things that I can do. I expect them to alleviate enough of the burden, or whatever you want to call it, so that I have the bandwidth to focus on what's within my pay grade, so to speak, for lack of better words. And so I think sometimes we struggle with that inside of this industry where, pre-show we were kind of chuckling that you need 187 vendors to run a car dealership. And because I think the reality of it is that it's not the vendor's fault for pitching you the product. Right? But it's also not all your fault, the dealer's fault, for believing that product would lasso the sun, the moon, and the stars for them, because that's how it was pitched to them. So as an industry, I think it's important that we come together and start having more meaningful conversations about, what does your product do? What can it actually help me do? In an ideal situation, I get it. But now it's incumbent upon me, the person being pitched upon, to say, do I have what it takes to successfully deploy this solution? Do I have the right people? Do I have a process? Do I have the time to install it and onboard and give it its due diligence? And if we don't do that, we're going to be in this perpetual cycle of failing over and over, perceived failure over and over and over again, because none of us were being self-aware enough. And so that's another common theme that we talk a lot about on the show, is like people, product, process.
Right.
It's focus on others, build relationships of trust, and be honest with yourself. If we're going to be an industry that throws around transparency, then we need to be transparent with ourselves and say, can I actually do what this takes? And have that open and honest conversation with people pitching you a tool, so that you have an honest look on how it will actually apply within the context of your circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. And focusing on, the problem that you're trying to fix, right? So what are you trying to solve for? Because you can get caught up in volume, and you can get caught up in all different aspects of the business. But when you boil it down, are you trying to fix a scalability issue? Are you trying to fix a growth issue? Are you trying to fix a people issue, right? Are you trying to make your people better? What are you trying to fix, and focus on that part of it versus just adding more and more trinkets on top of something that you haven't clearly identified. I think that can be, as somebody buying something, especially. That can be really difficult to do, but I think it's the only way to really clearly evaluate and get bought in and get your team bought in on what you're trying to do. Because if you know the problem, then you can go fix it. But if you're just chasing the sun, the moon, and the stars, like you said, the commitment isn't there beyond that 30 days. And then you're back to square one once you're ticked off because the trainers left, and 2 weeks later, everybody went back to what they were doing.
Right. It's one of those things too, where it's like, and show yourself a little more grace.
Sure.
This is going to take longer than you want it to, but guess what? We all have more time than we think and less than we want.
Yeah, that's true.
For example, I think about this. I'm actually fascinated by this concept. It took 1,500 years to go from a chariot and horse to horse and buggy. Like, it took 1,500 years for someone to be like, it'd be good, like, if we could fit the whole family in this deal. You know what I mean? Like, it took 1,500. It took, within the last 200 years, Greg, we went from horse and buggy to freaking stealth aircraft.
Yep.
Now, why do I say that? Because it's that type of narrative that makes us go, holy crap, the iPhone was it's only 14 years old. Look how fast we've come in 14 years. Technology's moving so fast. What are we going to do? I can't keep up. Guess what? What does any of that have to do with you? Do you know what I mean? Like, what has anybody stopped and just said, hold on, pause. I need to pause this arbitrary thing called time for a minute and say, what does that have to do with the fact that, to your point, I have a scale issue, I have a personnel issue, I have a heart of coal issue. You know what I mean? Like, what does any of that matter? So we let ourselves panic because technology and the world is moving so fast around us that we get sucked into the vacuum of, oh, better have that thing because it's the latest and greatest, and I need the latest and greatest in order to keep up with technology. And if I don't keep up, then the customers don't want it. They're not going to do business with me, and so on and so forth. I'm blown away, though, by just how many customers, boots on the ground in the local communities, are still just saying, I wish they could move me faster through the store. Yep. Or I wish they didn't treat me like gum on the bottom of the shoe. Or I wish they would just send me a text message when my car was done in service. Like, these are not, like, text messaging has existed for how long now? They're not even asking for today, the today things. They're asking for just decent human, keep me in the loop things. Yeah. That have existed for years and years and years. And so why does it matter that we put all of our chips on new and emerging technology when en masse today customer is wondering, why can't I just get a text message?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of that, so to take that example, right? I want a text message when my car's done. The last time, this was, 2 weeks ago, I'm in a service drive and there's 4 advisors working the counter at the time. It was right around lunchtime. So it was like 11:30, 12 o'clock. And I think each one of them had 2 people on hold on the phone, right? And there were about 14 people standing in line with questions about the car. Who knows what their inbox looks like, right? They got a couple texts standing there waiting for approvals on stuff. And so we take a step back and we go, why can't we just text the consumer? And the reality is that service advisor's got a hard job and he's got a lot of stuff to do. And pulling out his phone and texting, you or me to let us know that our brake job's done or our oil change is done. That's one more thing on the list. And it's so easy for it to fall off because you're not sitting right in front of them. There's like I said, 14 people standing there waiting for answers, or waiting to pay or waiting to whatever.
Right. And this is where that grace thing comes in. Like, show yourself some grace and sit down and say, okay, acknowledge this is an issue. And to your earlier point, what are we going to do to solve it? What's the solution to this one thing? We don't have to solve our whole dealership. This is a one consistent, thorn in our side. What are we going to do to solve that thing? Right. Hey, Jim, do we expect Jim to, with all the other things? No, Jim's at bandwidth. Okay, that's not enough to put him on the chopping block. He's a human being.
Right.
But like maybe then we explore the softwares to send that text message to tie into our system so that Jim can continue to do the things that are worth his time and that require that human touch. And these notifications can run on autopilot.
Yeah. You want that advisor selling. I mean, that's where the relationship comes in, right? When you're trying to sell something, that's when you want the relationship. And notifying somebody of anything, right? It's time for your appointment tomorrow. Your car's done, or take it to the next level. Hey, the work's done on your car. It's going through the car wash right now. It's expected to be out in 20 minutes. Whatever those kind of update type of things are. Why put that on somebody that could be generating revenue? Mm-hmm. And you can help them in a lot of ways build that relationship without them having to spend the time on it. So,
yeah, I love that. I love the way you put that. It's like his job is to build relationship and generate revenue. And we flipped that in our industry. We're like, what more software can we implement to generate the revenue for us? And you're like, oh no. And we need to break out of that cycle, right? It's not the Facebook ad that sells the car for you. It's still that person boots on the ground who reaches out and says, hey, Mrs. Johansson, so excited to chat with you about this vehicle. You have 15 minutes later today or tomorrow to experience the most breath of fresh air, shopping experience you've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah, and just engaging wherever she wants to engage, right? And if you just want to talk through Messenger, that's fine. But if you want to come in and check out this car, that'd be great too. So, or build one that better suits you. Michael, I actually want to shift gears a little bit too. So we're getting really good conversation, but I'm curious on your perspective while I have you. Crystal ball, what kind of the future looks like. And I don't want to go too far out because, if you go past even 6 or 12 months, who knows?
Right.
But looking at everything going on out there and where our industry is today and what potentially could be around the corner, what do you see as some things to look out for, right? If you're looking around that corner and once we turn that corner, whenever that is, whether it's, next month or next year or a year from now, what are some of those big things to just keep an eye out for that dealers and everybody in the industry should be aware of?
Well, I love that what I'm about to say is also predicated on human behavior. Yep. I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist or human behavior specialist, but I do have some life experience at this point.
Right.
We're just waiting. At time of recording this, we are just waiting for somebody with the authority to officially announce that we're in a recession. We all know why they're not doing it. The midterms are coming up, right? They don't want to be the government, the sitting government that admitted they led us into a recession. But shortly thereafter, we've all lived through recessions before. In fact, a lot of people were sleeping through it because we were distracted by the pandemic, but there was a recession in early 2020. We just didn't know because we were all forced to stay at home. But what do I see? I see human behavior. What happens is we're starting to see people reconsider purchases, especially those that sit in that 600 to 700 credit score range, because they're the ones that go and spend all the money anyways. People with higher credit score and disposable income, they're just going to buy things regardless of the market condition. And then everybody else is going to get categorized somehow into subprime, type of a situation. And they're not going to be spending anyways. But we're starting to see a slight hold on people, willing to spend their money, whereas largely through the last several months, people were spending their money like crazy.
Sure. So
we're going to see more of that when the recession is finally announced by the media. That's when the panic sets in. It's the same way we saw it in 08, 09. It's the same way we saw it in the early days of the pandemic. It's the same way we saw it in the 80s and the 90s. It's when it's officially announced, people go, oh my gosh, stop spending, stop this. And we're going to see that again. The important thing to know, though, is if you track the last 5 to 7 economic downturns, they've lasted between 5 and 24 months. And then they're always backed by about 5 to 15 years of explosive growth. And we just experienced that, right? You go from 08, 09 to now, and things exploded. So much wealth created in that time period. I think we're in for that same cycle, 18 to 24 months of kind of like, oh boy, and people are going to be hanging on. And during that time, it's going to be incumbent upon anybody who needs to make money to live to be that much more convincing of why you should part with those dollars with me versus them. Why I deserve it. Now, what is that going to mean? That means we really have to consider what going over and above means, because we haven't had to in this industry in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It means that dealers who were at 2 million net profit, who went to 6 million net profit during the pandemic, ought not be comfortable with the 6 million, because they might track backwards a little bit, but they need not worry if they know how to look at their money. They need to say, oh, I'm at 4 million, I'm down 2 million a year. No, dude, you're actually up. You're up 2 million over time from where you were. And I guess my call to those listening and watching is do your best. It's not going to be easy, but do your best to remain level-headed, to take a step back and say, what am I dealing with? And back to your earlier comment, Greg, what's the problem and what do we need to solve for?
Yeah.
And if you navigate the next, 18 to 24 months like that, you are going to be positioned for that explosive growth, while perhaps some of your contemporaries are being forced to sell out, be acquired, or shut the doors.
Yeah. No, that's a good perspective. Obviously, not a fun one, but
not a fun one. But it's like, here we go, buckle up, folks.
And I would add to that as well. Be ready, be prepared. Actually, I listened to an episode that you had recently talking about preparation and, if this, then what, right? And that's a really good mindset to have. But I would add to that and say that as a dealer, as a GM, even as a salesperson, I would certainly encourage you not to just accept that. Right. Find other ways. How do you continue that growth? When you look over time, you're talking about ups and downs and peaks and valleys. And auto industry is a close trailing indicator of the overall economy, right? Economy's up, car sales are up. Economy's down, car sales are down. It's pretty simple. But as a dealer, as an individual dealer, whether you have one dealership, 10 or 100, how do you get past that, right? What can you do to expand your footprint? What can you do to continue to see growth? It won't be easy. It won't be the same, but it's not impossible, right? I know a dealer pretty well down in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and he is selling cars in 49 states right now, and delivering them. And his volume has skyrocketed because he's shifted his mindset from bringing people to the store to taking the store to people, right? He views his dealership as really two different entities. He's got a brick and mortar store that welcomes people in and they deliver a lot of cars that way. But then he's also got essentially an online storefront, and he'll deliver cars that way too. And he's built this into his staff and his culture. They've just shifted their mindset to say, you know what, let's not accept the fact that we have a ceiling. And yep, there's issues and there's headwinds and there's struggles, but we're going to grow. And he's done a fantastic job. And I would encourage anybody out there, if you want to, right, if that's what you want, be prepared and understand that you could be facing some different times. But there's always ways, right? There's always a way to find an opportunity and to take advantage. So it's
one of those things, right? I tend to be much more of a realist, and for the wrong audience, that comes across as pessimism. Oh, nay, Greg. it's how we like, I don't want it sugar coated. I want to know what am I actually dealing with? And so you're right. Like, I am with that realism, I'm incredibly optimistic. There's always a way. Everything is, let's make up a word. Everything is figure outable. There you go. You know what I'm saying? That. And so, like, as we navigate this time, I appreciate you listening to that episode, because that's what we're trying to do with our community is, hey, if you're prepared, there's nothing to fear. You're anticipating. All we're doing is we're anticipating. Will it go the way I think it will 100%? No, it never does. Right. But if I can anticipate, now let's give them, the listener, the viewer, something actionable to walk through, maybe a simple exercise. Because what I found in my own experience is when I fear the most, it's because of a lack of preparation and a lack of confidence that I can actually do it. Can I do this? What am I? And so I take out, now my iPad and my Apple Pencil, but a piece of paper, whatever, your notes app on your phone. Do I feel confident that I can do this? Answer honestly. No. Why? Answer why. Get to the crux of why. I just don't feel like we're up to speed. And I feel like guess what? You've now just identified the top 1 to 5 things you need to tackle now.
Yep. There's your problem.
And there's your problem. Now go do something about it. Now, when we look at the perpetual high producers, high productive dealers in our industry versus those that perpetually struggle, that is an exercise they don't shy away from. What is it that's causing me to feel this way about my business? I'm not feeling confident. What would boost your confidence? I've been hanging on to not having this conversation with Judy for too long. Nobody says it's going to be easy, but you got to do it. So to your point, you identify those problems. Don't overwhelm yourself. top three, tackle those. Then do the exercise again and tackle those. Top three again, tackle those. If you're constantly pursuing your definition of success that way, then you will never fail. You're like Doc Rivers. You can't get that guy. It's like, I don't know what happened. It's like, you guys lost the game. Yeah, I know. I'm with you. I don't know. It's like one of those things. You can't get them. And it's the same thing here. Like, define what success means for you. Forget all the reports and the comparisons and the whatever. What does success mean to you? Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines success as a favorable or desired outcome. In that light, that means all of us, you have a different idea of what's favorable and desired for your family than I do for mine. Therefore, there's enough success to go around. And if we can get clear on that, success means a team that is professional, kind, whatever, like lives according to our core values, is accessible to the customer, helps the customer, goes above and beyond. Okay, well, so now what do you do to achieve that? Let's walk backwards into each of those things. Oh, man, they should probably be trained on this. And they're like, okay, let's go. There's your list. And so I want the realism of what we're already in that just hasn't been announced to be met with action predicated on what are we actually dealing with. And I believe in my heart, not just dealers, any business owner, if they can write that list and come up with why they feel the way that they feel and deploy a little bit of self-awareness, they're going to come up with the list of things that the actions that are most important for them to take. No different than, hey, I don't like the way my jeans fit. Well, why is that? Because I ate too much over the Christmas holiday. What am I going to do now? I'm going to come up with an exercise plan, a healthy eating ritual. So, it's no different. We do this in all aspects of our life. If we can do that, then what I believe is those next 18 to 24 months will look much more bright and hope-filled for you than those who just never take that action.
Yep. No, that's a great perspective, great way to look at it for sure. All right, Michael, I want to be respectful of your time. I really appreciate you taking so much time and chatting today. But while I got you, before we hop off, anything that we didn't touch on that we should, or anything else you want to hit on?
No, thanks so much for having me. This was a blast. Really enjoyed your questioning and the conversation. And, certainly we'd love people to go check out flexdealer.com. And if you haven't subscribed or listened to the Dealer Playbook podcast yet, you got 10 years of episodes to catch up on, but it's available wherever you get your podcasts.
No, that's great. Appreciate it. I could talk to you for hours probably, but thanks so much for hopping on, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. See ya. What a great conversation with Michael Cirillo. Really appreciate him coming on. Before we hop off this week, don't forget you can watch or listen to episodes of Connected on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, and make sure to hit subscribe so you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.